Good morning, everyone. And welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's online worship service. I'm the Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you are carrying with you today and all your heart longs to set down. I'd like to pay a special welcome this morning to Lakeshore Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, who's joining us from Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Welcome, Lakeshore, to our online worship service, and hello. And I'd like to welcome everybody in to the service this morning by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are the lyrics of Sweet Honey in the Rocks, Ella's Song by Bernice Johnson Reagan. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of Black men, Black mothers' sons, is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers' sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. That which touches me most is that I had the chance to work with people, passing on to others that which was passed on to me. To me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light as they carry us through the gale, the older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in a number as we stand against tyranny. Struggling myself don't mean a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult. I'll bow to no man's word. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Let's go now to our beloved sanctuary to light the chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
I'm Reverend Kimberly Tomczyk Carlson, and it is my honor to serve as your Minister of Religious Education. The story I have for you today is called Martin's Big Words. It's by Doreen Rappaport. Everywhere in Martin's hometown, he saw signs, white only. His mother said these signs were all over southern cities and towns. Every time Martin read the words, he felt bad, until he remembered what his mother told him. You are as good as anyone. In church, Martin sang hymns, he read from the Bible, he listened to his father preach. These words made him feel good. When I grow up, I'm going to use big words too. Martin grew up. He became a minister like his father, and he used the big words, the ones he had heard as a child from his parents and from the Bible. Everyone can be great. He studied the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. He learned how the Indian nation won freedom without firing a gun. Martin said, "Love," when others said, "Hate." Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. He said "together" when others said "separate." He said "peace" when others said "war." Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together. In 1955, on a cold December day in Montgomery, Alabama, Rosa Parks was coming home from work. A white man told her to get up from her seat on the bus so he could sit. She said no and was arrested. Montgomery's Black citizens learned of her arrest. It made them angry. They decided not to ride the buses until they could sit anywhere they wanted. For 381 days, they walked to work and school and church. They walked in the rain and cold and in the blistering heat. Martin, he walked with them and talked with them and sang with them and prayed with them until the city white leaders had to agree that they could sit anywhere they wanted. When the history books are written, someone will say there lived Black people who had the courage to stand up for their rights. In the next 10 years, Black Americans all over the South protested for equal rights. Martin walked with them, he talked with them, he sang with them, he prayed with them. Ministers told him to stop. Mayors, governors, police chiefs, judges ordered him to stop. But they kept on marching. Wait. For years I have heard the word wait. We have waited for more than 340 years for our rights. They were jailed and beaten and murdered. But they kept on marching. Some Black Americans wanted to fight with their fist. Martin was convinced not to. He reminded them of the power of love. Love is the key to the problems of the world. Many Southerners hated and feared Martin's words. A few threatened to kill him and his family. His house was bombed. His brother's house was bombed. But he refused to stop. Remember, if I am stopped, this movement will not be stopped because God is with this movement. The marches continued. More and more Americans began to listen to Martin's words. He shared his dreams, and it filled them with hope. I have a dream that one day in Alabama, little Black boys and Black girls will join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. After 10 years of protest, the lawmakers in Washington voted to end segregation. The white-only signs in the South came down. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. cared about all Americans. He cared about people all over the world, and people over the world began to admire him. In 1964, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He won it because he taught others to fight with words and not fists. Martin went whenever people needed him. In April 1968, he went to Memphis, Tennessee. He went to help the garbage collectors who were on strike. He walked with them, he talked with them, he sang with them, and prayed with them. On his second day there, he was shot. He died. His big words, though, are still alive for us today. The end.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that story. As we enter a time now of meditation, followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. Well, you're in your houses. You can stand if you want. Followed by Spirit of Life. I just invite you to go ahead and take a moment and find yourself in your body. Maybe that means beginning to attend to your breath and feeling it moving in and out of your lungs, letting it bring you into being here and now. Maybe it means feeling your feet on the floor, grounding you. Or maybe it means feeling your spine, every vertebrae stacking one on top of the next. Or maybe it means feeling the very tip top of your head, connecting you to all that is. Get comfortable in your body and come into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Come be with us today. Hold us in all the chaos and turbulence, the love and the challenge of this time. Ground us in the strength of community. Entwine us in the interconnected web of all existence. Help us know that we are part of all that is, held by it and beholden to it. On this Sunday, before the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, let us remember his prophecy and the transformative work of the civil rights movement. Let us honor it by being part of the transformative work for racial justice today. May it be so, and amen.
My name is Susie Seidelman, and I am honored to serve as your worship associate. Today's service honors Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who asked us to further justice by using one of our most beautifully human tools, imagination. In the days after the election, I read a piece by a friend of mine, a queer person of color, in which he asked white Americans to imagine the experience of people of color around the United States. I shared it with my friend and fellow First Church member, Yolanda Ludke, and we want to share parts of it with you today, mixed in with our own ideas.
Through empathy, we hope we might find inspiration to imagine a more just and better future. I sincerely hope that all of my white friends will reflect on and understand the great burden of sorrow that all of us who are people of color in this country bear. Contemplating the fact that approximately half of the white people in this country, and in some communities, the vast majority, voted for the most openly racist, xenophobic, bigoted, and bigotry pandering president in U.S. history is something that many of us are finding simply too much to bear. It is a deep, world weary sorrow that we're feeling. Not new, but causing acute pain in this moment and in so many moments to come, nevertheless.
Think about everything that's happened in the past 4 years, with a sitting president who has been spewing racism, xenophobia, and bigotry of all kinds every single day, as well as acting out that bigotry in his official actions. He has used the power invested in his office to deliberately cause harm to people of color, immigrants, LGBTQ people, non-Christians, and all oppressed and marginalized groups in this country. He has used his power to inspire many others to do the same. And as we have seen, they get away with it virtually unscathed.
I fully realize many white people will never understand how painful it is to us people of color that there were tens of millions of people who chose to vote in favor of this. One of the fascinating elements of racism is how individual white people can consistently support racism across their entire lives and yet, with total ease, insist on their personal non-racism. But we people of color aren't fooled. We can see racism in words, attitudes, actions, and in inaction. We see what people are by what they say and what they do. We see people as they reveal themselves to us. And you reveal the heinous monster you chose to elevate to power is in all of you. As it happens, the burden of sorrow we bear this day and every day is simply a reflection of how meaningless our lives are to you, that you won't, even for a moment, imagine how painful it must be when you make clear your bank account and notions of personal liberty are more important than the Black and brown bodies piled across our nation as they've laid for hundreds of years.
So, if there are any individuals who still do not understand, please search your souls to try to understand, because this is important. It's up to every individual who hears this to reflect on it and to try to understand it, to internalize it, and imagine living it every day. Because this is not the life white people live. White people can choose to go through the entirety of life wrapped in the seemingly protective cocoon whiteness offers, having been trained to never see past it and encouraged to make that choice again, every day. But if we want to truly imagine a brighter, more just future, we each need to peel back the layers. We have to see past our own lived experience and empathize beyond our comfort zone. The path we have known is not the path that will carry us forward into the future we know we have an obligation to create.
But you can learn to be comfortable with this discomfort, and you can find a brighter truth than anything you've thought possible. You just have to choose to do so every single day. We can do this together.
Real quick to see what they're chanting.
I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
Obviously, they're chanting, I can't breathe. It's a protest, a march in honor of George Floyd that lost his life earlier last week. Everybody's raising their hands here on the on-ramp from University Avenue to 35W. As you can see, he's pointing up toward the sky. There's a military-type helicopter overhead with something below it. People are obviously watching it.
Might dispense some water or something.
And now people are running. And
look out, be safe. Be safe.
Help, they're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill me. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Mama, 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 help. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
And I think what sparks so much outrage is that there seems to be no regard for humanity or human life in the video that we all witnessed. The officer sat there with his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for an unbearable amount of time, almost 10 minutes. That is unconscionable. And he had a smirk on his face and his hands in his pockets like he was totally relaxed. And I think that lack of humanity, that lack of respect for Black life is what has enraged so many people.
Help, they're gonna kill me. They're gonna kill me. I can't breathe. 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 I can't breathe.
In a conversation with my colleague and friend, the Reverend Abby Tennis, last night, she told me that the word conspire comes from the Latin root meaning to breathe with. Members of the movement for Black lives, people working for racial justice, have said that right now they don't need allies, they need co-conspirators. What would it be like to understand that not just our liberation, but our lives are fundamentally bound up with one another, that our breath is bound up with one another to conspire, to breathe together. On August 28th, 1963, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial and told the gathered civil rights marchers about his dream for America. It was a hot day, and marchers had been gathered for hours of speeches and programs. Many of them had been there marching and working for days. When Dr. King took the microphone, he started his speech in the past, talking about the Emancipation Proclamation. And then he journeyed through centuries of racial oppression and into the present, when he talked about how in his time, Black people were still oppressed by segregation and discrimination and poverty. He talked about the fierce urgency of the moment. He said, now is the time to make real the promises of our democracy, to uplift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice and onto the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. But it was the end of his speech, when Dr. King started to talk about the future, that launched this speech into the stratosphere as one of the most well-known, quoted, and loved American speeches of the 20th century. It was during this final segment that Dr. King started using prophetic imagination as his frame, and the speech became known by that frame. I have a dream. In 1978, professor and biblical scholar Walter Brueggemann wrote his landmark book, Prophetic Imagination, and said in it that prophets are poets who both criticize current realities and energize the people with the new thing that God is doing in the world. I have a dream, Dr. King began, that one day, this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Dr. King went on to share dreams of justice, justice in Georgia, justice in Alabama, dreams for his children, to be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Dreams for little Black children and little white children to be able to hold hands together as siblings. These dreams opened up the nation's heart and inspired its moral imagination. In his 1994 book, Moral Imagination, Implications of Cognitive Sciences for Ethics, Mark Johnson argues that the way we think means we need imagination to solve moral challenges. Johnson draws on the work of cognitive science to argue that because we use narrative and metaphor to understand complex and abstract ideas like morality, that the field of morality is not absolute. Nor is it relative, Johnson argues, as what have been called in the past absolute moral laws actually represent an amassed human experience of what is right and what is wrong. Rather, Johnson argues, moral decision-making requires a third way, neither the way of the absolute nor the way of the relative, but rather the way of imagination. As we, as human beings, continue to encounter new moral challenges that do not fit into absolute categories or exactly match previous human experiences, we need to draw on our previous human experiences and knowledge of right and wrong, action and consequence, and then use our moral imagination to understand how to respond to the new challenge happening now. Remembering the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement this weekend, it's important to learn moral challenges, moral lessons from their work in order to apply those lessons to today, as well as recognize the way that this moment differs from the previous one. We must use our moral imagination to understand how to move forward today. Looking back, one important lesson from the civil rights movement is that Dr. King and the movement itself were controversial when they were happening in the 1960s, 1950s, and 60s. In 1966, 2/3 of Americans who were polled by Gallup said that they had an unfavorable view of Dr. King. According to Claiborne Carson, in an interview that was published last week, Claiborne Carson, who's the director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Institute at Stanford, Dr. King's favorability ratings plummeted by 26 points between 1963 and 1966 because he moved his attention from segregation in the South to segregation in the North. When pointing the finger at Southern segregationists and Southern racism, Dr. King was much more popular with Northern white folks. But when he moved up to marching in Chicago against segregation and poverty, those Northern white folks didn't appreciate the move, and his popularity plummeted. It's much easier to idealize and to criticize other people who are far away in time or in space than to face the injustices nearby that force us to question how we live our own lives. However, that reckoning is exactly what the moment calls of us. Another frustrating truth of the similarity of the work of the civil rights movement and Dr. King and now is that voting rights are still an essential struggle. The Voting Rights Act passed in 1965, largely due to the civil rights movement's treacherous and bloody Selma to Montgomery march of that year. Then, in 2013, the United States Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act by removing the requirement for voting districts with a history of discrimination to have federal oversight of changes to their voting rules. The majority opinion in that case was that although the Voting Rights Act had worked, things had changed since 1965, and federal oversight was no longer necessary. The late, great Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg led the dissenting opinion in that case which recognized that racism is still very much at work in our society. She wrote that, quote, throwing out federal oversight when it has worked and is continuing to work to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. Wisconsin used to be a leader in voter accessibility. However, during former Governor Walker's first term in office here, 2011 to 2015, the Republican-led legislature passed 33 election law changes, according to Madison's Capital Times. Those election law changes include voter ID, shorter early voting windows, and extra hoops for college voters to jump through. The Wisconsin voter ID law is one of the most restrictive photo ID laws in the nation. At the end of Walker's term in December of 2018, the legislature further restricted voting by limiting in-person absentee balloting to 2 weeks before an election. Then, after the 2020 presidential election, the challenges to Wisconsin election votes only focused on Milwaukee and Madison, where the majority of the state's people of color live. Voting matters because it elects people to power where they make decisions about our lives. Folks who benefit from white supremacy are still actively trying to keep the right to vote out of the hands of people of color. It was happening then. It's still happening today. There are also things that are different in today's movement for racial justice. The movement for Black Lives has focused on policing today, as the number of Black people shot and killed by the police continues to disproportionately exceed white folks relative to population. What has changed is that these instances have increasingly been caught on camera and show the visceral violence of the policing system on bodies of people of color to the public. Today's movement for Black Lives is using prophetic imagination to call the public to exercise our moral imagination. Their platform calls for defunding the police, a radical call for change that's gained traction in the last 6 months since George Floyd's murder and the protests that followed. The movement for Black Lives is critiquing the current circumstances by highlighting policing's role in society, which is to enforce law and social control through the threat or use of force. Social control. Consider the number of times that we've seen white people call the police to enforce some sort of social control over people of color, for playing music, or for being at a pool, or for requesting a dog to be put on a leash. White people use the police for social control, historically and right now. Many police departments can trace their roots back to the control of Black people and people of color, whether that's through Black codes or through trying to recapture slaves who escaped. The movement for Black Lives is also critiquing the system of policing for its violence especially against Black, Indigenous, and people of color. The movement is doing more than critiquing present circumstances, however. They're also calling us to exercise our moral imagination to try to figure out how to create safety for our communities without resorting to violence, without resorting to methods that have proven fatal to Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. They're asking us to use our imaginations to find safety in a way that doesn't rely on violence for the control of Black and brown bodies. In his 2005 book, The Moral Imagination, The Art and Soul of Building Peace, John Paul Lederach defines moral imagination as the ability to identify possibilities so that we might journey together down unknown roads and create something new. According to Lederach, the moral imagination requires 4 things. 1, the ability to imagine ourselves in a web of relationships that includes people that are different from us, people that we love, and people that we dislike. 2, the ability to embrace complexity without being trapped in social divisions. 3, a commitment to creativity. And 4, the acceptance of the risk that inherently goes along with attempts to transcend violence. How can we transcend violence in this society? How can we transcend the violence we've seen perpetrated against communities of color in the United States? How can we be safe? How can we be safe in our communities without engaging with a system that has proven to be fatal to Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and harmful to BIPOC communities? We must be able to engage our moral imaginations, to journey down unknown roads and create something new. We must be able to see ourselves in a web of relationships that includes all people. We must be able to embrace complexity, commit to creativity, and be willing to take risks. Additionally, Lederach does not say it, but I would argue that to make change that benefits everyone, we need to be willing to center the experience of the people who are at the margins of our society. When the people who are experiencing the most marginalization and harm in a system are centered in a solution, that means that the solution will work for all of the people in the circle of relationships. We have to be able to dream. We have to be able to imagine something better than what is in order to make it so. I've heard folks say they cannot imagine what defunding the police would even look like. So maybe the beginning of the exercise, of the conversation, is to start to try to imagine it. Justice and new circumstances, new moral challenges require moral imagination. Together, as a society, we can imagine how to transcend the violence that police and white supremacists have perpetrated against Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color by following the lead of Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color, by listening to their experiences and by centering their imaginative solutions. Junauda Petrus, the award-winning author of the book, The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, wrote the following poem after Michael Brown's killer was not indicted. In her introduction to the poem on Vimeo, which I strongly recommend you looking up so you can hear this poetry in her voice, she said, "Michael Brown to me was such a sweet, tender-looking boy, and this man who killed him characterized him as almost monster-like. And I thought, if these police are so afraid of us, I thought, who can be around us that's not afraid of us?" And I wrote this poem. Could we please give the police departments to the grandmothers? Give them the salaries and the pensions and the city vehicles, but make them a fleet of vintage Corvettes and Jaguars and Cadillacs with white leather interior, diamond in the back, sunroof top, and digging the scene with that gangsta lean. Let the cars be badass. You would hear the old school jams like Patti LaBelle, Stevie Wonder, Anita Baker, and Al Green. You would hear Sweet Honey and the Rock harmonizing on We Who Believe in Freedom Will Not Rest, bumping out the speakers, and they got that booming system. If you up to mischief, they'll pick you up swiftly in their sweet ride and look at you until you catch shame and look down in your lap. She asks you if you're hungry and you say yes, 'cause of course you are. She got a crown of dreadlocks, and on the dashboard you see brown faces like yours, shea buttered and loved up. And there are no precincts, just love temples that got spaces to meditate and eat delicious food, mangoes, blueberries, nectarines, cornbread, peas and rice, fried plantain, fufu, yams, greens, okra, pecan pie, salad, and lemonade. Things that make your mouth water and your soul arrive. All the hungry bellies know warmth. All the children expect love. The grandmas help you with homework, practice yoga with you, and teach you how to make jambalaya and coconut cake from scratch. When you're sleepy, she'll start humming and rub your back while you drift off. A song that she used to have the record of when she was your age. She remembers how it felt to be like you and be young and not know the world that good. Grandma is a sacred child herself who just circled the sun enough times into the ripeness of her cronehood. She wants your life to be sweeter. When you're wild and out because your heart is broke, or you don't have what you need, the grandmas take your hand and lead you to their gardens. You can lay down amongst the flowers. Her grasses, roses, irises, lilies, collards, kale, eggplants, blackberries. She wants you to know that you are safe and protected, universal, limitless, sacred, sensual, divine, and free. Grandma is the original warrior, wild since birth, comfortable in loving fiercely. She has fought so that you don't have to, not in the same ways at least. So give the police departments to the grandmas. They are fearless, classy, and actualized, blossomed from love. They wear what they want and say what they please. Believe that. There wouldn't be noise citations when the grandmas ride through our streets, blasting Stevie Wonder and Nina Simone, Marvin Gaye, Alice Coltrane, Jimi Hendrix, and KRS-One. All that good music. The kids gonna hula hoop to it and sell their lemonade made from heirloom pink lemons and maple syrup. The car is solar powered and carbon footprint less. The grandmas designed the technology themselves. At night, they park the cars in a circle so all can sit in them with the sunroofs down and look at the stars. Talk about astrological signs, what to plant tomorrow based on the moons, and help you memorize Audre Lorde and James Baldwin quotes. She always looks you in the eye and acknowledges the light in you with no hesitation or fear. And Grandma loves you fiercely, forever. She sees the pain in our bravado, the confusion in our anger, the depth behind our coldness. Grandma knows what oppression has done to our souls and is going to change it, one love temple at a time. She has no fear. May it be so, and amen.
Morally, I was led to nonviolence because I felt that it was the best moral way to deal with the problem. We were seeking to establish a just society. And it was my feeling then, and it is my feeling now, that violence is certainly much more socially destructive, and it creates many more social problems than it solves. So I was led to nonviolence for deep moral reasons. And I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
There is no freedom, the wise man said, let justice roll down when the poor cry out for shelter and bread. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Hatred will never drive out hate. Let love roll down, roll down. Remember, our hearts can make us great. Let love roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let your love roll down like a mighty stream. When brutality threatens our daughters and sons, let peace roll down, roll down. May our voices rise up louder than the guns. Let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. And let peace roll down like a mighty stream. Step by step, one by one, let justice roll down, roll down. They can kill the prophet, but the dream lives on. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream. Oh, children, don't you get weary, walk together, believe in the dream. When the way gets rough, we'll make a new way. Let justice roll down like a mighty stream.
I turned to it because I felt that it was the morally excellent way to deal with the problem of racial injustice in our country.
Thank you all so much for your generosity. As you know, pledges are the core of our church's spiritual practice of generosity. We're also grateful for additional gifts that support our ministry, and thank the folks out there who are supporting this ministry by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or who are giving on our website, which you can see on the screen there. Your gifts help us continue to provide you with this ministry. We also share the plate with an organization each month. Peace Action of Wisconsin is our January Share the Plate recipient. Peace Action Wisconsin is a peace and justice organization which works to abolish the threats of war and nuclear weapons. They're committed to nonviolence as a way of life for a world where human needs are met and the environment preserves. To make a donation to Peace Action of Wisconsin, please visit their website at peaceactionwi.org. You can see all of these options on your screen now, and they'll also live on in the YouTube comment section of this video after worship is over. So thank you so much for giving either right now or for coming back later to make a donation. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you so much. We'll close our worship service today with these prophetic words from author and organizer Arundhati Roy. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. On a quiet day, if I listen very carefully, I can hear her breathing. Blessed be. And amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. 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 Whoa, yeah, yeah.